ready to get started here. My name is Avis Garcia, and I am a third-year doc student in the Counselor Education and Supervision program here at the University of Wyoming. And I did a presentation similar to this one last year on how mascots affect Native American population here in Wyoming. This first picture that I have here looks at the mascots of, when you look at what people see when they see Native Americans, because of all the images that are portrayed in media, such as the Pocahontas and using the mascots by sports teams, that a lot of non-natives, when they meet Native Americans, they have these images in their head because they see it in the media all too often. So if you see this two people walking here, and says you don't really look like an Indian, because he's comparing that person to the pictures in his head that he's received through media. Racial stereotypes in entertainment. Media stereotypes are inevitable, especially in the advertising and entertainment and news industries, which need as wide of an audience as possible to quickly understand information. Stereotypes act like codes that give audiences quick, common understanding of a person or a group of people, usually relating to a race, gender, sexual orientation, social role, or occupation. I found this picture at the casino on the Wind River Reservation. They have a new, like a little museum there. And I thought I would add it to my presentation because I'm from the Wind River Reservation, and this is a picture that was in Riverton, Wyoming in 1964. You see the sign in the window that says no Indians or breeds allowed. My grandparents that raised me told me several years ago that they weren't allowed to go into the stores into town, that they often would go so far to shop for their children or just for themselves that they had to wait for somebody to come to them that would go and do their shopping for them because they weren't allowed to enter the stores. I like this quote here. For a subject worked and reworked so often in novels, motion pictures, and television, American Indians are the least understood and the most misunderstood Americans of us all. And this is by John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy, I believe, is one president that gained a lot of respect from Native Americans. I feel that he was the first president that stood up for Native Americans and worked hard to make changes for Native Americans. I'm one of those people that I've had a lot of questions asked to me when I came here, which led me to this presentation that I do here on stereotypes and mascots. Is I've always been one to show me the research. Where's the research behind this that shows that these stereotypes and images can be a threat? So my presentation is going to cover some research that has been done looking at the effects of mascots on students. Stereotypes exist in the world, not simply inside individual minds. Social representations refer to the ideas and meanings essential for societal functioning. They're taken for granted understandings of the world that are widely shared and play an enormously important role in our approach to the world and our behavior. Stereotypes are reflected and inscribed in the practices, policies, and institutions that comprise society. Stereotypes are enacted in everyday and interpersonal behavior. Stereotypes are a representation of ideas and practices with a twofold function, the orientation and communication. The American flag represents American ideas and freedom and independence. One of the studies that I'm going to share today is done at the University of Illinois, looking at this mascot that they had, Chief Illinois. Images like this are important, not because it tells us how to be Native, but because it tells other people, many whom do not know a single Native person, that this is what a Native looks like, and how a Native behaves. For Native students at predominantly white universities, this creates a situation in which they have to negotiate their identities in exactly the way the cartoon describes. For many non-Indians, an Indian must resemble a historical image, one frozen in the past and in the historical archives. The noble, proud warrior dancing about and worshiping nature's mysteries. This is a quote taken from an article written by Trimble, who's done a lot of Native American research. Social representations of American Indians in mainstream media and a content analysis of national newspapers in 1997 and major films in 1990 and 2000, relatively few, 0.2% representations of American Indians were found. The representations were largely stereotypical and or negative. American Indians are seldom represented as contemporary people or in contemporary domains such as students, teachers, doctors, lawyers, businessmen. In a composite week of primetime TV in 1997, no American Indian characters were identified. In a 2-week composite of primetime TV in 2002, 6 out of 1,488, that's 0.4% of the TV characters were identified as American Indian. In a composite week of TV commercials in 2000, 0.4% of speaking characters were identified as American Indian. This cartoon here shows how the media has affected the way Native Americans are viewed by students. This cartoon here, the students are saying, how cool, which are you, a sports team mascot or a Disney character? This influences how we see ourselves, especially in times of transition. This provides information about whether we belong or if we can be successful. The research that I'm going to share examines the psychological consequences of American Indian mascots on American Indian students who are the targets of the representations. It also examines the psychological consequences of American Indian mascots on European American students who are the observers of the representations, and discusses the implications of American Indian mascots in intergroup relations, in particular on school and work environments. What is the impact of Indian social representation on the self-esteem? This is study 1, and the community efficacy, study 2, of American Indians. We took these are the most common public representations of Native people and examined how they influence Native people. In study 1 and 2, 72 American Indian students, and They were high school students with an average age of 16.4 years. And study 2, there was another 152 American Indian students. And these are studies by Freiberg that were used. And in the study about media representations, participants were primed with an American Indian social representation, and then they completed a self-esteem or a community efficacy measure. The priming conditions were these 2 pictures. The one on the left there is the Pocahontas, and then the Chief Wahoo from the Cleveland Indian team. These were the priming pictures that were used. And the priming and the other conditions that were used was condition 3, which was the negative stereotypes, which is 50 to 55% of American Indian high school students drop out of high school. Suicide rates are the highest for any ethnic group, and alcoholism rates are of enormous proportions. And condition 4 was no prime. There was no pictures, no information like this presented to them. So in study 1, the questionnaire results are to state your self-esteem. The responses are, I feel that others represent and admire me. I feel confident about my abilities. I feel pleased with my appearance right now. I feel concerned with the impression I'm making right now. And these are the responses that the American Indian students had. If you can see the Pocahontas, their self-esteem is low, the Chief Wahoo is low. The negative stereotypes is somewhat low, but not as low as those images right there. But then the control group that had nothing, they didn't see any of that, their self-esteem is the highest here. In study 2, when we're looking at the community efficacy, how this affects how people relate to their communities, people in my community can take action to make things better. I feel like I can make a difference in my community, and I wish I could have more respect for my community. And these are the results. And these are from the students that are in the study. The Pocahontas and the Chief Wahoo, the students responded low, based on those 2 priming pictures. The negative stereotypes, just a little bit more, but then the control group that had no effect at all, their self-efficacy score is higher. And the attitudes about mascots. Do you agree or disagree with using Indians as mascots for sports teams? This was asked. This is the response. These are the high school students, and as you can see, the control group agreed because they weren't shown those negative images or that negative information. Chief Wahoo, the disagreement is higher. This is just looking at the picture and responding to the measurements that were given. Respect for American Indians. For sports teams, do you think European Americans who dress up as Indians are showing respect to American Indians? Yes, neutral, or no? This suggests competing motivations for Indian mascots. To be visible requires accepting being seen as something essentially less than human. A mascot is a caricature. It's making fun of Native Americans. This doesn't represent what a true Native American is. In study 3, do American Indian social representations in this case American Indian mascots impact the number of achievement-related possible selves? Do all American Indian mascots have the same impact on American Indians? What types of social representations of American Indians will increase well-being? Does it matter if the American Indian mascot represents an American Indian university? What are possible selves? Possible selves are the selves that people would like to become or are afraid of becoming. They are cognitive manifestations of enduring goals, aspirations, motives, fears, and threats. Social representations and achievement-related possible selves. Participants, 172 American Indian, 92 females and 80 males from a predominantly American Indian university participated in this study. In this procedure, they were primed with a social representation of American Indians and completed a self-measures assessment. These were the conditions. Condition 1, the team was presented with Chief Wahoo, and the second one was Haskell Indian Nations University, and this is their Indian. And the conditions 3 and 4. 3, again, we have Chief Illinois, and condition 4 was no prime, there's no control, and participants completed the possible selves measure. In condition 5, this is an ad for the American Indian College Fund. Have you ever seen a real Indian? The results. American Indian social representations and possible selves. If you see how it affected their achievement, how they view themselves in regards of being able to achieve, the Indian College Fund had no effect. The Chief Wahoo, the Haskell Indian, and the Chief Illinois, and the no prime control. This is where they had none of those images shown to them, that they had higher view of themselves as being able to achieve goals. In the positive condition, have you ever seen a rural American Indian? In many cases, this is the only domain in which European Americans seem interested in dialoguing with us. They claim that they are honoring us. And so what is the impact of the social representations on the self-esteem of European Americans? So they took this same study that they did with the Native Americans and got European American college students to see what effect it has on their image of Native Americans. So this study had 136 European college students, 71 females, 65 males, average age of 19.8 years. They were primed with the same social representations that you've seen in the earlier slides and completed a self-esteem measure. These were the priming conditions that were used in the first study, the Pocahontas and the Chief Wahoo. And the same ones of the social problems, the American Indian students that drop out are 50 to 55%. Suicide rates are the highest, and alcoholism rates are of enormous proportions. And this is the type of things that I feel that a lot of media really elaborates and puts out, is all the negative stuff. You don't hear about the good things and the positive things that are happening for Native Americans. So that's why I feel people have this negative image of Native Americans, that just because of this, they assume that that's for all. Although, I can say I've been affected by all of those negative things there. I'm a high school dropout. I had suicide in my family and alcoholism in my family. But through education, we can make a difference. American Indian social representations of self-esteem for European Americans. This is those same pictures. As you can see, their self-esteem is much higher all the way across. And this is after looking at those pictures and filling out that same response form. The next one is more interesting. As you can see, the American Indians' responses are on top. The European Americans is on the bottom. And if you look at the mean self-esteem rate for the European Americans, they pass that mean rate. And look at the American Indians, those same pictures, Pocahontas, Chief Wahoo, and the negative stereotypes, they don't even reach that. This is just looking at those pictures and that information. Two different groups of people of how they view Native Americans. Mascots promote stereotypes that set limiting and prescriptive expectations for group members. This is especially harmful to natives. That is a quote taken from Freiberg from the study that I'm sharing here. Studies 5 and 6 show the impact of American Indian social representations on the self-esteem and likability of American Indians. 55 European American male college students, mean age of 19, and study 6, 46 European male students, mean age 20.7, and they were exposed to an American Indian social representation on a t-shirt. Everybody wears t-shirts with pictures on them. And that was on the research assistant in the picture. And after that, they were given the self-esteem or a likability measure to complete. These were the priming conditions. This is the researcher. One shirt, he has Chief Wahoo on there, and then this one has the Notre Dame. And the priming condition for the control group, there's nothing on the shirt, it's just a plain black shirt, no image. Again, the participants completed a self-esteem or a likability study after that. And this is the results on the self-esteem for the European Americans. If you look at the control group, the mean self-esteem is low, but the Chief Wahoo, the score went up. Self-esteem went up for the person wearing that, and the Fighting Irish went back down. I thought this was kind of interesting. Study 6, the likability. Do you think you would like this person? Sometimes we see a little of ourselves in other people. Do you feel this way about this person? Not me. Do you feel that you and this person have any common attributes? The person wearing that t-shirt? This is the team mascots and the likability results for the European American students in this study. Interestingly, the Chief Wahoo, they like that person better for some reason. Social representations can have unintended and negative effects. In particular, using American Indians as mascots has negative consequences for American Indians. As a field, we have not given enough to the thought of patterning of ideas or images that shape our environments. These ideas or images provide a message about who counts and who does not count, and who is valued and who is not valued. Past research has looked inside individuals' heads to understand the impact of social representations. One of the frequent arguments that I've heard and read in a lot of my research on this topic has been that people feel that they are honoring and representing and complimenting Native Americans with these images without giving any thought to actual research that has been done. Yet no other ethnic group in the United States is portrayed as a mascot, and no other ethnic group would tolerate such portrayal. For some Native Americans, a sports team with an Indian mascot or logo exacerbates a tragic American legacy of government-sanctioned genocide, bigotry, racism, economic and political deprivation against Native American tribes. I found this slide in my research on mascots, and this is from Stanford, California in 1958. And I always have to laugh at the Native American images that they have because they're pretty ridiculous. And then the quote that's there on the side of "We're fighting Californians for the blue and gold for a scalp or two." What can Stanford do? We're starting on the warpath for a scalp or two. And this is in 1958. I mean, if something like this were to happen around here, I think it would be a big outrage. But this has continued throughout time. If you see the Fighting Sioux logo for the University in North Dakota, that's their picture in the 60s and the 70s, the 80s and 90s, and now this is their 2000 logo. Big improvement in the picture, but still it's using a native as a mascot. This next picture is one that I really don't care for, but I think it needs to be shared because I've seen these on social media. The University of North Dakota, some really offensive pictures, and these are on t-shirts and posters. This one here especially says, if they were called the drunken, lazy, welfare collecting, free cheese eating, whiny ass Sioux, then you would have something to complain about. And this was a poster hung outside the University of North Dakota's Indian Studies Department. There's always this big misperception that we have free schooling. We have to pay just like everybody else has to pay. We have to fill out the financial aid forms, and some of us have to work. Education is something that we have to work for. There are some things that do help, but for the most part, it's not free. In particular, using American Indians as mascots has negative consequences for American Indians. The social representations can have unintended negative effects. In the case of American Indians, social representations of their group depressed how they felt about themselves, as you could see in the results from this study, their self-esteem, their community efficacy, and what they were able to do to become their possible selves. In a lot of the social media, the Native Americans are such a small portion of the United States population that you don't see a lot of natives, and when you do, it's usually not good. It doesn't show Native Americans in contemporary society, as I mentioned earlier, of being professors and doctors and lawyers and doing all these other things that other races do. So we're not presented to society in that manner. In the case of the European Americans, social representations of American Indians increased how they felt about themselves and their liking for others who used American Indian mascots. European Americans incur no social costs for using American Indian mascots. Teachers, coaches, and employers should ensure that the existing relevant social representations do not devalue or limit individual identity and potential. In the case of American Indians, it may be important to recognize both what is represented and what is not represented in the environment. The messages that inform natives that they do not belong or that they cannot be successful in an environment may be invisible. Creating and developing new and positive social representations may be one route to countering the effects of negative or limited sets of social representations. And I've noticed I'm running over time a little bit, so I'll move on. This is Floyd Crow Westerman. He says, our children have to live under the kind of racist attitudes that are expressed through the mascots in sports. This one is a respectable picture, and this one isn't. Media can play a role in giving Native Americans the right to have some input into the images and information that is shared in media. And last, this is my daughter. She's a Native American, and I just thought I would share that. And to say ha-ho, it means thank you in Arapaho, and open it up for any questions if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Avis, for that great information. The research studies that you provided, for the most part, reflected the opinions of young people, college-age people primarily. That disturbed me. However, is that representation repeated in the general population as well? Have you had a chance to look at other studies, or is that different from the general population?
I was looking at the college-age population, and there is very limited research on this, so I was excited when I didn't find this research. There was a study done by a couple of Native researchers on elementary children. And similar to what I shared with you, using the same types of pictures, they didn't use any of the information that we shared, such as the high dropout rate and the suicide and stuff like that. Just those pictures alone showed that those elementary school children that were Native American, after looking at those pictures, responded to those self-esteem measures that showed lower self-esteem than the control group that were not shown those pictures, who showed a little bit higher self-esteem that weren't shown that. So that was specifically with Native American children. There was also some other information that was presented to other Native American children on other races, which I found was interesting on, for example, Asian Americans. We always stereotype them as overachievers. They're like the super smart people. And that the black African American population of being people that would be likely to commit crimes, and that the Native American children responded to those things in that manner as well. So, and as far as the general population, I don't, you know, when I first started researching this topic, it mostly touched on the journalism aspect of using mascots, and how a lot of journalists want to make the money, so sometimes they'll promote it. And that there are a couple states, Oregon is one state, that decided to impose some regulations that stops the use of using mascots and terminology and information that presents a negative stereotype. Is that it?
Thank you.
Thank you.